Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are, or even good evening. Really nice to see all of you. I'm so excited to talk about the Meditator's Four Friends. And this is something that I've been thinking about a lot in my own practice and in my own experience, having started meditating really almost 50 years ago. I can't really believe that because I still think I'm not that much older than 25, but somehow the years have passed. And over the time, I've had the opportunity to study with amazing people, to practice on deep retreats and in collective awakening settings, and to read and work with teachers on the classical Dharma. And one of the things that I found was that in the classical teachings, they put forth this amazing ideal, this ideal of, complete enlightenment and profound compassion and joy and equanimity and insight. And it's inspiring. And I always followed that. It pushed me to always hold very high standards and to keep reaching beyond and reaching beyond and reaching beyond. At the same time, I also found that once you commit, at least for myself, once I committed to this path, and I'm going to describe a little bit more about that, I really feel that we hold ourselves to those highest ideals, even if we haven't really realized them yet. So we're leaning in to these profound, unimaginable ideals, and yet we're embracing them as our reality now. And that's why I decided to take some of the concepts, which I've called the four spiritual friends, and talk about them as those very intimate companions on our path right now. Three of them come from the four Brahma Viharas, which are called the immeasurables. And they're immeasurables because we can't even fathom what it would be to have a sense of love and kindness for absolutely every being in the planet. So that's wishing, or in the cosmos. And that cosmos in Eastern cosmology includes all these realms and dimensions that we can't see or ever know about. So from these incredible deva, God realms, all the way down to unbelievable, excruciating hell realms, when we embrace metta, or love and kindness, one of the four immeasurables, we are wishing happiness and well-being to every creature in all these different realms. So there are so many billions of possibilities, we can't even fathom it. And it just short circuits your mind in a good way. So you just have to let go and surrender and embrace. Now, many of us find it hard to embrace ourselves when we don't live up to our highest expectations, embrace the person who's driving too fast and not looking where they're going, with their coffee in their hand and their phone in the other hand, and you're wondering who's taking care of the wheel. And, let alone figures in power who are not caring for the well-being of the planet and all its creatures in the way that could be done. So this ideal is immeasurable, and it is really difficult to attain. So at the same time, when we hold that ideal of love and kindness close, and we start with ourselves, something amazing is possible. So that's the attitude and approach that we're going to go into these four friends. The four immeasurables in the classical sense are metta, love and kindness, karuna, which is compassion. So love and kindness is the first, which is wishing all beings happiness. Karuna or compassion is wishing the end of suffering for all beings. Now, they sound kind of the same, but they are slightly different. The third, which I love, which we're going to go into quite a bit, is called mudita, which is sympathetic joy, which is embracing the joy of others as our own and really delighting. So we're going to go into that because I think that's very powerful and profound and helpful, especially when we're having a hard time. And the fourth is really the foundation. And sometimes in the classical teachings, they start with that. It's called upekkha or equanimity. And that doesn't mean this cold, detached, stone Buddhist state, where we're just like, in our space and nothing touches us. As human beings and as embodied practitioners or aspirants or committed people on the path to awakening, that equanimity is maintaining that sense of goodwill in the face of difficulty. So we don't allow ourselves to lose discrimination. Like when teenagers get super excited and they're just out of their heads, or preteens even, they're just so out of their heads. It's very sweet, but it's not very reliable. And at the same time, they can get very despondent when something doesn't go their way. So we recognize, we take the big approach. We have a big aperture on the lens of our lives. And we really see that equanimity is being deeply caring about life. So when we wish everyone well, when we wish to end suffering, when we embrace spiritual friendship for ourselves and for others, which is something that I want to talk about as one of the four friends. And when we delight in the well-being of others, it provides this ballast. Or, it's like being out in the middle of the ocean in a massive, life raft. So waves come and go, and, we ride up and we ride down, and we don't end up like plunged into the water. So in the way I want to approach all of this, we'll do meditation, we'll talk about these, and really lean in to a profound shift in our relationship to ideals that we hold really far from us. So we want to bring these ideals very close. We want to make them alive in our hearts and minds and being in such a way that we're not holding them by force. We're not holding them tightly. We're holding them loosely. And in holding them loosely, we are allowing the edges of ourselves to dissolve so that there's no separation between us and these ideals. And that, I think, is the secret to contentedness on the path, to walking without a trace. They often say that Buddhas leave no trace. So what does it mean to leave no trace? It means that we're not kind of constantly making a mess in our lives and dropping things off the back of the truck and bumping into people metaphorically and emotionally. And we're weathering the storms of existence with a lot of gratitude. In the Eastern traditions, they talk a lot about lifetimes. And whether you believe that literally or not, it doesn't matter so much. I think as a metaphor, it's really helpful for us because in the West, our time frame is very narrow. We kind of can manage to think about what happened 10 minutes ago or last week, but our time frame isn't the sense of a deep span of time, the deep evolutionary time, the 13.7 billion years of evolutionary history, the 300 million years of brain development, these big stretches of time, it's helpful. And so I think the notion or the concept or the metaphor of reincarnation is helpful because we don't know why we're struggling and our best friend never seems to have any struggles in their lives. In Eastern cosmology, they would say, well, it's the merit they accrued in past lives and the negative karma you accrued, but who really knows? We don't really understand it. We don't really know, but it's helpful to think that way because then we don't complain about every little thing that happens to us. We just say, okay, this is my karma. This is how my life, my path is unfolding. And my challenge for growth and depth and awakening is to embrace every facet of my life from the highest possibility, from holding the meditator's four friends close, rather than waiting for a time when we're more awakened to act more awakened. And, when I started consciously on the path, I was very, very intent to meet people who I felt were incredibly wise and enlightened. And, I had the good fortune of meeting people who I thought were really operating from a depth of sensitivity that was way beyond what I could perceive. Their insight, their compassion, their lightness of being, their joy in life, their ability to hold tremendous suffering that they had witnessed without weight on their shoulder was just phenomenal. And I really wanted to be like them. And I would go to different retreats and different practices and different traditions. And everybody would always say to me, oh, you should take refuge, which is the Buddhist commitment to awakening. You should become a sannyas, which is the yogic commitment to, certain vows and precepts, or you should become this, or you should become that, and you really fit here. And, because they would see this is when I was, in my early 20s, and and even late teens, they would see my intensity, but I never felt like I was ready to commit. I felt like, and interestingly enough, the Buddha he said, don't take my words because I said them. You have to, this is a path of investigation. And so I really felt like I wasn't ready to commit, because if I really made that commitment, I had to really mean it. I had to be sure that no matter how my life unfolded, I was going to give absolutely everything to being awakened in this life, or as far as I could go. And so, as I've learned since the adolescent brain, which goes through until your late 20s or 30s, is very, very intense and sort of black and white. And that was definitely my attitude, was I wasn't, I was going to do it with absolutely all my heart and soul. And I really did mean it. And it took me about 3 years of many months of retreat and study and practice in different traditions and with different teachers before I felt that I was ready to truly commit and take refuge. And at that point, I wasn't taking refuge in a lineage, but I was taking refuge in where you say you take refuge in the Buddha, which is the principle of being awake, being realized. You take refuge in the Dharma, which means you take refuge in the principle of a wise path that is true and holds up to rigor. And you take refuge in the Sangha, which is the community of other practitioners. And so I had the opportunity to take refuge in Dharamsala, which is the home of the Dalai Lama, with one of his tutors who gave him transmission and deep teachings on the Kala Chakra, which was one of the things that he felt very strongly about in his life, of giving those teachings. And this person was born in 1929 and fled Tibet when the Chinese took over Tibet and went into India. He taught the children's orphan school in Dharamsala, and then he went on a 15-year retreat. So he was in 15 years of solitary retreat. And he had already been recognized. I think when he was 9 years old, he was recognized as a lineage holder and the head of a monastery. So he was really quite something. And there were 5 of us who were invited to take refuge with him in his tiny, tiny refugee hut in Dharamsala. With the roof was made out of these big tin oil cans of cooking oil that they would cut open and flatten out, which wasn't very good because it rained a lot in Dharamsala and also snows a lot there. The room was large enough just for his meditation bed, a place to do prostrations, and 5 of us meant, and plus 1 translator, meant that one person had to stand outside the door. That's how big his little home was. And when our translator was Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who became very well known, has had many monasteries throughout the West, in New Zealand, Australia, the West Coast, India, different places. He passed away a couple years ago, not that long ago. But he was our translator. And when I went there, I was ready. I was terrified and I was ready, because I was making this commitment where you repeat this: I take refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha, and you repeat and you do 3 prostrations before this tiny, tiny wizened man who had just, had finished 15 years of solitary retreat and was giving empowerments to the Dalai Lama and was there. His life was really the perfume of an offering to anyone who came his way. And so even thinking about it, I haven't really told this story for a long time, but even thinking about it brings up so much deep emotion, because that his purity made me feel the potential of human possibility. And it made me want to commit to, as far as I could possibly go, that I wanted to dedicate my life to that type of purification and understanding and great compassion. Because I really felt that there was nothing else that would be as important to do. And so from that moment, when I took my vows, and I wasn't taking my vow with him as a teacher, or even with the Tibetan lineage, which I love Tibetans and I love their teachings, but I'm really not a Tibetan Buddhist. The practices are very complicated. And yeah, if you measured me by my Tibetan Buddhist practice, I would not be a very good practitioner. But their way of engaging in real time with these teachings, and the demonstration of their humanity after a genocide, their lack of vindictiveness and their care, really spoke to me. I said, they are holding something in the cells of their being, which I want to dedicate my life to. And so when I took refuge that day in 1986, I knew that that was a commitment I could never go back on. And it meant that from that moment forward, everything became important. Everything became conscious. Everything became now. So even though I knew that we were going, it'd be on a path and I would gain in understanding, I certainly hoped, since I was 23 or 24, one would hope that one matures a little bit over time and gains in insight and wisdom and practice. I wasn't going to postpone or excuse myself from living to the highest possibility at that moment. And that's what I feel. That's why I wanted to call these the Meditators for Friends, because these are not qualities that we're going to wait for and do in the future. These are qualities we're going to hold closer than close so that we embody them and that they are our companions through difficult times and joyous times, and that they really provide the guardrails for our lives. So I thought that it'd be nice to do just a short meditation to really set that intention. And not that necessarily you would set the intention in the way I did at that time, but set the intention for whatever brought you here. So we'll do a short meditation, and it'll be kind of half meditation, half contemplation, to allow yourself to drop in to yourself. So if you're in a comfortable position, that's great. And allow yourself to really rest in stillness. Letting yourself become aware of your own being in space. And if your body is uncomfortable, just let it be. Allow yourself to soften. Allow yourself to be okay with maybe things in your body not being okay. And let yourself connect with the deepest part of you that wanted to devote some time on this Saturday to spiritual reflection. Part of you might have been curious, part of you might have felt like you needed it, part of you might have felt like this is something you should do. But beneath all of that, really allow yourself to access that bottomless, infinite part of the heart or mind continuum, where you feel that sense of excitement and curiosity, that sense of fullness and lightness of being that is almost expectation and yet without grasping. It's like when you're with somebody you love so much that whether it's a partner, a child, a grandchild, where you just feel in their presence, you're so excited to be with them that you want to be even closer than close. That depth of self. And as we just rest in the stillness, just in silence for a bit, let that sense of deep love permeate your being. And we'll just rest in silence, letting this aspect that usually remains a little bit out of sight come to the forefront of our awareness. That aspect of ourselves that is so deeply in love with life. And allow yourself to drop into that or dissolve into that so that your sense of your own self is non-separate from that profound joy of life, that profound wish for the end of suffering for all beings, the end of unnecessary conflict, the end of strife. Now you can begin to just release this reflection without feeling like you need to do anything else. And letting that trust in your own process to be something that you don't doubt or question. Or even if you doubt it, you don't doubt your process of doubting. I don't quite know how to say that differently, but just be easy with everything. Be easy, be accepting of everything as it is.